Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Saoirse Healey, and tonight I am joined by a former Deputy Presiding Officer and MSP for East Kilbride, Linda Fabiani. Good evening, Linda. How are you today?
I'm absolutely fine, thank you, Sasha. Yeah,
Brilliant.
braving the wind and weather.
And are you taking your retirement time to relax a little bit, or are you keeping up the pace of Holyrood?
Oh, certainly not that pace. No, no. It's really interesting. I know it's a cliche, and people say, "Oh, I don't know how I had time to work," but that's exactly how I feel. I always seem to be doing something, but it's great. I'm really happy. Fine. Yeah, no regrets.
So we start tonight's show off with a day 344 Ukraine war update. The Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov has warned that Russia is planning a major offensive to coincide with the 1 year anniversary of the war in Ukraine on the 24th of February. In an interview on Russia's state TV, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that everyone wanted the conflict in Ukraine to end, but the West's support for Kyiv was playing an important role on how Russia approached the campaign. A Russian rocket destroyed an apartment building in eastern Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk late on Wednesday and killed at least 2 people and 7 were injured, the regional governor Pavlo Kirilenko said. 2 more Russian missiles struck Kramatorsk today, resulting in a number of civilian casualties, according to Mr. Kirilenko. 2 more people have been killed by Russian shelling in Ukraine's southern Kherson region on Wednesday, according to local officials. A 25-year-old man was killed in Kherson city, and a 44-year-old woman was killed after Russian forces shelled a residential area in the village of Komishani, the regional military administration said. More than a dozen top EU officials, including the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, arrived in Kyiv on Thursday with promises of more military, financial, and political aid. The EU's top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, has announced a doubling of the number of Ukrainian troops to be trained by the EU to 30,000 this year. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has announced an international centre for the prosecution of crimes in Ukraine will be set up at The Hague. President Zelensky has urged the EU to impose more sanctions on Russia. Now, Linda, what do you think about the potential for more sanctions? Do you think this will be an effective method, or will it
Mm.
just result in more of
Oh,
the same?
yeah, I'm all for more sanctions because I think very, very strong messages have to be sent. But I read an interesting piece at the weekend. I can't remember who the journalist was, but it was a really interesting piece. And what he was saying was that when you actually travel to the cities, particularly I think it was Moscow, everything looks normal round about the city centres.
Mm.
And there's still shops who appear to be operating there under some kind of system that allows them, big names, that allows them to say that they're not. So I think that has to be looked at. But there's this show in the cities that I'm, pretty sure, and commentators are sure, is not replicated right across the country. So there are hard times going on. Um, and the big worry is that Russian people, the ordinary Russian people, do not genuinely appear to know the truth of this conflict. And more domestic propaganda today, when the foreign minister said, oh, everybody wants this war to end, but the West are making it difficult. Ending it is in Russia's hands. They are the invaders. And so when they say things like that, it's about keeping their own people on board. So, yes, I do think the more sanctions that can be applied, the better. That then may allow the truth to come out more quickly, and the stopping of this conflict may well be in the hands of ordinary Russians. They have to know the truth, though, before they would act.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So, fierce fighting has continued in the eastern of Ukraine, where Russian troops are trying to gain ground near strategic logistics hub of Lyman, according to Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Malaya. The Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Stronhas has today said that Norway will increase the spending from its sovereign wealth fund in the coming years to fund military and civil aid to Ukraine. Andrei Medvedev, a former commander of Russia's Wagner mercenary group who fled to Norway, has said that he wants to apologize for fighting in Ukraine and was speaking out to bring perpetrators of atrocities in the conflict to justice. Now, what do you think of that? Do you think that he should be able to make his statements from Norway, or do you think he should be held accountable domestically? What do you think about that kind of thing?
Oh, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's a very,
Yeah,
very
it's very,
difficult
very
one.
difficult.
Without knowing uh, what this chap has been involved in, the level he was at, ergo his involvement, it's very, very difficult to say. But my instinct is if there is somebody there that knows what was going on and has walked away from it and said, this was not acceptable, this is not what I thought, I want to apologise, this is what's really happening, I would say use them. Absolutely use them. Can I just say too that I hadn't heard earlier on what you just said, Sasha, about the Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund being used to rebuild Ukraine, for humanitarian aid further down the line. I think that's a really, really welcome move, because when this is over, and we have to hang on to the positive that says it will be over, and that Ukraine will have regained its sovereignty. I use regained in terms of it's never lost it as far as we're all concerned, but there is that worry ongoing. It's going to need huge help to get back on its feet. So I think that's a really, really welcome statement by the Norwegian Prime Minister, and the fact that they have a sovereign wealth fund that has come directly from the royal resource, something that Scotland was never allowed to have. What a wasted opportunity that was.
Absolutely. And, like you were saying, we have to look for the positives and look for the end of the
Yeah.
war, because it will come, and hopefully it will come soon. So moving on
Yes.
to our next segment. So the Bank of England raises UK interest rates to 4%. They have blamed the inflationary impact of higher than expected wage rises from an increase in interest rates from 3.5% to 4%, piling on more pressure to mortgage payers and businesses struggling to pay off their loans. Amid calls from unions for higher wages to protect against the worst falls in living standards for 100 years, a majority of the bank's Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, said that the 0.5% point rise was needed after a jump in private sector wages above the central bank's previous forecasts. Marking its 10th consecutive rate increase, the bank said the economy would enter a shorter and shallower recession than it predicted last year, with output falling by 1% from peak to trough, compared with a 3% drop it said in November. The UK economy is forecast to shrink in each quarter of 2023 and the first quarter of 2024 before staging a modest recovery. The bank said the hit to trade from Brexit was being felt sooner than previously expected. The effects of Brexit on trade are now estimated to be emerging more quickly than previously assumed, and that lowers productivity somewhat, it said. The 0.5% increase was forecast by Citi analysts, who expect the bank to raise interest rates again to 4.5% in the spring before a series of cuts next year brings banks' rates back to 3.5%. More than 1.5 million mortgage payers are expected to suffer an average of $3,000 a year increase in interest payments when they refinance their loans this year, as well as hundreds of thousands of households that refinance at higher rates in 2022. Monthly bills for households in the rental sector have rocketed, the landlords blaming higher borrowing costs for this rise. 2 members of the 9-member MPC voted to keep the rates at 3.5, arguing that the effects of previous rates rises had yet to feed through the wider economy. SNP economy spokesperson Stuart Hosey, MP, said, "For as long as Scotland finds itself under Westminster's control, our economic future will continue to suffer. This corrupt, clapped-out Tory government has led to the UK to the brink of a recession and ensured the UK is the only major economy tipped not to grow this year. Their catastrophic Brexit and today's interest rate rise will mean mortgage holders now face the unthinkable scenario of having to pay thousands of pounds extra per year in interest." Now, Linda, I just mentioned about the impacts of Brexit on this.
Yes.
What do you think about the impacts of Brexit on the interest rates?
Well, I think Brexit has affected absolutely everything. Socially, but economically as well. And the economy has been hugely impacted by Brexit in all sorts of ways. What I found quite astounding today, Saoirse, was that the Prime Minister is still in denial about this. Now, I know he's a clever guy, right? He might not be as brilliant as he seems to think he is, but he's no daft. He's pretty smart. He knows, his ministers know, his cronies, his set, they all know that Brexit has had a terrible effect on the UK economy. And they're still not admitting it because they can't admit that they did something that has caused this. The upshot of that is, so much in what you said there, day-to-day living costs. And I mean, I don't know the detail of why the 2 members of that committee for the Bank of England said that they didn't agree with the increase. However, what they did say was that the previous increases haven't had time to filter through yet. Well, when you consider this is the 10th, I do have a certain sympathy for that, and I would like to look into that a bit further. But the impact on folk, now I'm fortunate, we had a wee bit of a laugh earlier about how my retirement's great. And it is. Part of that is that I'm very fortunate. But another part of it is that I'm of an age that I no longer have a mortgage. Very fortunate. But I do remember when I was growing up, getting old, 25 years of having to pay a mortgage. And every time there's a change in interest rates, people with mortgages are worried sick. And there must be so many people right across the country now, so concerned, so worried about the roof over their head. And it's a fundamental basic right is to have shelter, that roof over your head. So they're worried about that. They're also worried about the cost of food, which has gone up hugely. And I just think for young people entering the market, for people that are a wee bit older and maybe started their families and trying to make a life for themselves, it must be absolutely horrendous. Meanwhile, the other interesting thing I picked up from what you said was that the Bank of England are saying some of this is fuelled by wage increases in the private sector. Well, last time I was on Broadcasting Scotland and we had a discussion about this, there's still folk in the financial sector, the banks, the insurance company, generally at high level, getting massive bonuses and wage rises. Meanwhile, you've got those that we rely on to live days having to go out and strike, and the government trying to blame them for the economic crisis that we're facing. It's a terribly topsy-turvy way that we're doing things. I have absolutely no faith at all in anything they're doing. And what Stuart Hosey said today is absolutely right. We need out of this. We need to be making our own decisions and doing things differently, because this is going nowhere.
Absolutely. And what you were saying about the strikes as well,
Yeah.
they have been pushed to the limit to strike, and public sector is not getting what they should be getting. So speaking of profiteering and the private sector, Shell has reported $40 billion annual profits this year. The UK government is under pressure to rethink its windfall tax on energy companies after Shell has reported one of the largest profits in UK corporate history, with a surge in energy prices sparked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, pushing the oil company's annual takings to $40 billion. Opposition parties and trade unions described Shell's bonanza, the biggest in its 115-year history, as outrageous, and has accused Rishi Sunak of letting fossil fuel companies off the hook. This morning, the company confirmed that it had paid just $134 million in UK windfall taxes during 2022. The number is a fraction of the amount Europe will collect, with Shell expecting to pay a total of $1.9 billion in windfall taxes when the EU's solidarity contribution scheme is included. The company was criticised in October when it said it had paid the UK windfall tax up to that point, but on Wednesday said it was likely to contribute a further $500 million in 2023. Boosted by record oil and gas prices, Shell posted profits of almost $10 billion in the final quarter of last year, taking its annual adjusted profits to $40 billion in 2022, far outstripping the $19 billion notched up in 2021. SNP Energy spokesperson Alan Brown said, "The Tory government must scrap its outrageous plan to raise the energy bill price cap again in April and guarantee the energy bill support scheme payments for households will continue. People will feel sick that instead of helping ordinary families, the Tories are allowing big energy companies to make record profits and are forcing taxpayers to subsidise shareholders." The Scottish Green Party called Shell's profits sickening and underlined the need to shift to renewables. Linda, $40 billion in profit. I can't even imagine. It's inconceivable.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
It is mind-boggling. So would you say that this is capitalism in play? That's the rules of the game. You know, they're just playing this game? Or is it... On you go, sorry.
Well, it's rampant capitalism, you know. And unfortunately, we have a government, a Tory government, who totally buy into the whole free market thing. But what they don't talk about is the other side of their argument, which is that the free market automatically regulates. It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. It creates ridiculous profits for those and such as those. And when you look at the tax take from the UK government from Shell, I mean, my goodness, it's a fraction. Now, I'm not completely naive. I understand that there have to be tax breaks for, you know, the other things that companies do. I know that there's tax breaks for exploration and for various different things. But I also know that when you have a company that's making that kind of profit, even when you break it down and look at what profit has been made from Scotland's waters, the tax take by the UK government is very, very low indeed. Meanwhile, we've got, you know, some of the highest energy prices in Europe. We've got a government that's talking about raising the price cap again. They haven't yet guaranteed help, as Alan Brown said, for people going forward. They really should be, yes, looking at a further windfall tax, because that's quite a windfall that they've got. They should also be looking at a system of taxing share dealings and buybacks, which they haven't done. And as far as energy bills are concerned, I heard someone from, I think it was British Gas, getting interviewed this morning on the radio and saying they can't take, you know, even though the wholesale price has fallen at the moment, they can't bring bills down because you have to forecast these things and you don't buy at this price, you have to buy at a forecasted price. Well, you know, my first thought was, They put bills up soon enough when they forecast price rises. So how can they not bring them down when they forecast price drops? Uh, it seems to me that all the cards are held in the hands of those who are exploiting the oil and gas reserves. And the government could do something about it. They choose not to. There's examples across Europe where governments have, and the UK government, as you said at the start, just capitalism run riot.
And so you mentioned the fact that potentially the windfall tax that the UK government currently have isn't enough. How far would you push it? What kind of level would you take it to next?
Do you know, if I said what I wanted to do, I'd probably get arrested. They'd be at my door. They'd be knocking on my door any minute. I wouldn't pretend to be an expert. Absolutely not. But what I would say is that it needs seriously looked at. There are those who are experts, who have done the calculations, who have looked at it. We're not talking about bankrupting Shell International. We're talking about a fair deal for the people within the country that they're taking a heck of a lot of money out. And while we're part of the UK, let's face it, I'll be very fair here, it's not just our country, it's the neighbouring countries as well. So it could be done. Where there is a will, there is a way. We have never had a UK government that has seriously had the will to do it properly. I mean, even the Labour government, well, Keir Starmer's been very, very quiet generally. But talking about windfall taxes, yeah, that's fine. But that's a reaction to things. It is not the structure and the basics of a fair system. And that's what they should be committed to. Look at Norway. You know, we mentioned Norway earlier. Look at the sovereign wealth fund they built up. Missed that opportunity. We could look at it again for renewables. And I would hope that in an independent Scotland, we will. So governments can act in these circumstances. Unfortunately, we have a UK government that refuses.
Absolutely. So from extreme gains, we are now moving on to unfortunate extreme losses. The Trade Union Congress says that the UK has lost out on £400 billion of growth since 2010. According to the new report by the TUC, the failure of successive UK governments to recognise the negative impacts of public spending cuts on the wider economy has meant that Britain has missed out on £400 billion of growth. An extension of austerity measures and wage restraints until 2027 under the UK government's latest budget proposals would almost double the amount of lost income to £900 billion, say the TUC. If the UK had remained on its average pre-1979 growth rate, the level of national income or gross domestic product would be £2 trillion higher, it added. Meanwhile, the rocketing value of property, private pensions and shares have helped the UK's wealth to grow by 70% since 2010, with most of the gains going to the top 10% of richest households. Since 1979, household wealth adjusted for inflation has almost trebled, gaining £7 trillion. Government calculations in the aftermath of the 2008 banking crash predicted that public spending would make only a modest impact on the economic growth, allowing governments to make austerity cuts with little impact on GDP. Revised analysis by the IMF and Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development later found that public investment and spending on areas such as health and education supported a strong GDP growth. The TUC report echoes analysis by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the IFS, and the Resolution Foundation that shows income from work falling behind the assets from owning assets. Successive UK governments have taxed work more heavily than gains on property, pensions, stocks and bonds, allowing mainly older and richer households to make large gains over recent decades, whilst earnings remained flat. Now, earlier this week, the IMF predicted that the UK would be the only major country to contract this year after being weakened by high interest rates, still high energy prices, and trade restrictions following Brexit. Meanwhile, in a letter to the Prime Minister, SNP economy spokesperson Stuart Hosey has questioned Mr. Sunak's attempts to deny Brexit is damaging the economy and living standards at PMQs yesterday. In the week the UK marked the third anniversary of Brexit, Mr. Hosey called for Mr. Sunak to commission and publish fresh UK government analysis on the impact of Brexit and what it has done to the UK economy, trade, public services, and the cost of living since 2016. Analysis published by Bloomberg has suggested that Brexit is costing the UK £100 billion a year in lost output. Linda, not great numbers, not great statistics.
So we're back again to this Brexit denial, this refusal to admit that Brexit has caused problems. But, you know, even without Brexit, I think that the TUC analysis, and you were saying that the Institute for Fiscal Studies actually agrees with it, they match, which is really interesting. That goes way back. It goes to successive UK governments. It goes way back before Brexit. And so, yeah, this emphasis that there has been on the service sectors and financial sectors has helped the few and ignored the many. It's what it has done. And I can't stress enough, it's successive UK governments. It's not all the same people. It's not all the same party. They've all bought into that. And when you look at the case of Scotland, our manufacturing industry was completely scuppered so that the UK could become a service economy. Initially propped up by oil, of course. That was when they started it all. And the same goes for the north of England. The same goes for Wales. And it's all about everything being focused on a very small part of the UK, London and the southeast. And it's all about a focus on a very few number of people. I can't remember the figures you rhymed off, Saoirse, but it's as we know, there are those at the top of the tree who get all the time. And I thought what was interesting was one thing you said, which was, I think it was quoting the TUC, and it's absolutely right. Work gets taxed more than investment and profit. And, you know, we keep hearing successive UK governments, it's income tax, income tax, income tax all the time. Meanwhile, there's folk doing absolutely fine. Inheritance tax, I've got a thing, admit, I've got a thing about inheritance tax. But there's also, like I mentioned earlier, taxes and financial transactions and share dealings. There are loads of things that can be investigated for that. But no, the establishment that has become those who rule in the UK, regardless of what UK party is ruling that, at the end of the day, they look after their own. There's all sorts of wealth taxes that could be looked at. Land tax, land value tax, huge. Again, when you look at land ownership across the UK, it's absolutely ridiculous. Get it taxed. Stop giving them handouts for building trees. It's completely ludicrous. Oh, wait a minute, you don't build trees, you grow trees.
Grow trees.
But, you know, these landowners getting grants for doing nothing with their land until they decide to sell a wee bit for housing, you know. It's just a completely ludicrous system that we live under. And I get why the TUC is doing this. What they're doing is playing these people at their own game and in their own terms. But I know that the TUC, the STUC, and everybody else don't actually believe that this economic growth should be the only measure we use to talk about the success of nations. It should be more about the well-being of those who live and work. And but I understand completely why the TUC is researching in that way and using these figures. Let's hope it shames some of these folk into some kind of action.
So you mentioned earlier the fact that it's successive governments, not even necessarily successive Conservative governments, but the TUC General Secretary Paul Newark used the term doom loop, which is essentially holding down wages in favour of wealth for a boom for the rich. What do you think of the term doom loop?
I don't know. I think that's one I would have to get used to. I see exactly what he means by that. Over the years, I've had this frustration that you have Westminster governments who, and we're seeing it just now with the Tories and Labour. We're seeing it all over again. The way that Keir Starmer is dealing in opposition. Not talking about Brexit and not wanting to really change anything, and not telling these folk they've not to go out and support the workers. He's basically just waiting for his shot, and that's been the problem. That thing about parties lose government, it's not the opposition that win government. You've got two parties there that just wait for their turn, and it'll soon be Labour's turn, and they won't rock too many boats, so they perhaps get another term, and the Tories will just sit and wait till it's their shot again as well. We need some, or the UK needs some radical policies going forward and to implement them. Scotland needs independence so that we can make our own decisions about who we're going to allow to implement these radical policies. But same old, it just keeps going on. Now, I'm in my mid-60s now, and I remember feeling this way when I was in my 20s, and we're 4 decades down the line, and we've still got the same old faces. Your shot, my shot, your shot, my shot. It's awful. And we never get what Scotland wants.
So, moving on to Scotland. The Scottish budget for the 2023-2024 years has passed stage one of the debate. So in Holyrood today, the Scottish budget stage one debate passed with 68 votes for and 56 against the motion put forward by John Swinney. Mr. Swinney said that in a difficult financial environment, the budget focuses on resources on three key priorities of delivering sustainable public services, transforming the economy to deliver a just transition to net zero, and taking direct action to eradicate child poverty. He said that the budget includes more than £13 billion for health and social care and £1 billion for early learning and childcare provision. It also supports those hardest hit by the cost of living crisis with £442 million invested in the unique Scottish Child Payment and £20 million for the Fuel Insecurity Fund to help households at risk of self-disconnection or self-rationing their energy use. Mr. Swinney said, "These are fair and ambitious spending plans for the coming year, which have been developed during one of the most challenging financial environments since devolution." The Scottish Greens said that the Scottish Government's 2023-24, forgot what year it is, budget uses progressive taxation to deliver for people and planet. Linda, what do you think of the budget draft? What's your opinions on it?
I totally buy into the child poverty emphasis, but these things are long term. I mean so again, it's one of the issues about our system is that there's a degree of short termism because of the election cycle and the way we've actually got this sort of very oppositional way of going. It's a bit better in the Scottish Parliament, and I'm delighted about the coalition with the SNP and the Greens. But I've sat through many of these budgets, and the Scottish Government can't go into deficit. They're working on fixed sums. And it's an ongoing frustration. I could almost write the script for you, Sasha, even though I'm not there anymore, because the Tories and the Lib Dems and Labour will automatically vote against it, right? John Swinney will say, okay, come to me, discuss what you would do, but bear in mind that if you take money from that, that'll have an effect there. You want to give lots of money here, tell me who you're going to take it away from. And that'll go on, and they'll still keep voting against, and saying, I want more for the health service, I want more for housing, I want more for the arts, this and that. And the argy-bargy will go on and on. I actually think in the present climate, they've come up with a pretty good plan. I think it's as good as it gets. It could be a lot better, but a lot of that is down to Westminster. It's not down to John Swinney and the Scottish Government. So I like the emphasis on child poverty, but that'll take a couple of generations to really kick in and get to that well-being society that I would like to be seeing. So away from the short-termism, longer term, and away from this gimme, gimme, gimme more, but don't take anything out of the air to give me it. That's where it gets
Absolutely.
silly. And of course, we know there's only one answer that could really make that difference. And it's interesting that tonight, practically everything we've discussed, I'm quite sensibly able to say independence could make a difference in this.
Yeah. So, moving on to more international news, the US Senate Democrats push the FTC to restrict marketing of guns to children. In the US Senate today, a group of Democrat senators will introduce legislation directing the Federal Trade Commission to create rules banning the marketing of firearms to children, including the JR-15, which has become a target of gun control advocates. The planned legislation comes roughly a week after Democrats publicly called on the FTC to probe the marketing techniques of gun manufacturers We1 Tactical, maker of the JR-15 2022 long rifle. The similarly named AR-15 style rifle has been used in a number of high-profile deadly shootings in the United States in recent years. Now, unfortunately, the bill has a slim chance of becoming law as Republicans who control the House of Representatives have largely opposed additional gun control measures, consistently arguing they infringe on the right to keep and bear arms enshrined in the Second Amendment of the US Constitution. The legislation, known as the Protecting Kids from Gun Marketing Act, would in practice give the FTC the tools to go after gun manufacturers. Regulations already restrict the marketing of alcohol, tobacco, and other products to juniors. A junior version of the AR-15 has no place in a kid's toy box, said Senator Ed Markey, the lead sponsor of the legislation. Now, I don't know if this is just my UK bias, but the idea of having a kind of two-scale small model of a gun in a toy box. Linda, what do you think about that one? I think I could probably guess what you're going to say.
Oh, I'm totally with you. It just, see the idea of even having to talk about stopping marketing guns to children just stuns me. The idea that you would even consider ever having any kind of marketing that would promote guns to children is just horrendous. And and they've got the National Rifle Association will be up in arms about that. Excuse the expression, up in arms. You know what I mean? But that already. And it's a society that I find totally baffling. And when I look at all these Republicans, and there's some Democrats as well, who want no limit at all on weaponry. The idea that they just think it's your right, it's per the Constitution, to be able to bear arms. You know, time moved on, things change. Societies and governments and congresses and parliaments change things all the time as society moves on and things become different. And they have never even considered changing their gun laws. Meanwhile, you've got all these atrocities going on all over the place. And all I can say is that those Republicans, House of Representatives, who will vote this down, what they're actually saying, Thesha, is that they think it's acceptable for X number of children to be killed to allow them the right to bear arms. And I find that a very, very warped way of looking at things. And it's supposed to be the world's most advanced democracy. Well, you know, they're living in some of the dark ages with this stuff.
Absolutely.
Horrendous. And see, on a personal level, so much that has happened in this most advanced democracy in the world, on the other side of the Atlantic, actually puts me off the thought of ever wanting to go there again. You know, and I know I've been speaking to quite a lot of folk that feel the same way. What's happened in the US over the last few years has turned its back on what we see as progress moving forward and seems to be going back the way. And it's very, very sad.
Absolutely. So, up next, the Pope and faith leaders say to help the world's poor as well as Ukraine. The UK's government financial support for Ukraine must not be at the cost of aid to other areas of the world in crisis, three faith-based charities have warned on the eve of an unprecedented joint pilgrimage to South Sudan led by Pope Francis. The organisations are calling on the government to restore the 59% cut in the UK's aid budget to South Sudan and invest in peace building, conflict management and reconciliation. Their demand is supported by a new opinion poll that shows that more than half, 53%, of the UK's public agree that the UK should be a leader in providing humanitarian aid in countries facing conflict. The Pope, along with Ian Greenshields, the moderator of the Church of Scotland, and Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, will arrive in South Sudan's capital, Juba, on Friday for a 3-day visit they have called a pilgrimage of peace. They will meet with President Salva Kiir, as well as bishops, clergy, and people displaced by the fighting. The ecumenical visit was due to take place last July, but was postponed after the Pope was advised by doctors not to travel. South Sudan officially split from Sudan in 2011, but civil war erupted 2 years later after a political struggle between Kiir and the then Vice President Riek Machar. The conflict has claimed almost 400,000 lives and displaced millions. Despite numerous peace deals, violence continues, and the country is also experiencing severe flooding and localized drought. Now, moving back to Scotland, the deadline for school-aged payments is coming up. Parents and guardians who get qualifying benefits or tax credits and who have had a child born between the 1st of March 2017 and the 28th of February 2018 are being urged to check whether they should apply for Best Start grant school-age payments as this year's deadline approaches. Applications for the one-off payment of £267.65 per child, which can be used for books, bags, clothes and equipment for school, have to be submitted by midnight on the 28th of February. The Scottish Government introduced automatic payments for early learning payment and school-age payment in November 2022. Parents and guardians who get Scottish Child Payment will get school-age payment automatically when their child reaches eligibility and within a school-age payment window of the 1st of June to the 28th of February. Now, there are some people who don't qualify for the Scottish Child Payment that could be eligible for the school age payment. including those who get housing benefits. There may be others who choose not to apply for the Scottish Child Payment who can still apply for the school age payment. There are also parents and guardians who have opted out of automatic payments so they could have more control around when they receive this money. All of these people are being urged to check if they could be due a school age payment and to apply if they do. Statistics last week revealed that more than £105.8 million has been paid by Social Security Scotland in the Best Start group of payments, which also includes pregnancy and baby payment and early learning payment. Social Security Minister Ben McPherson said if you have a child in the family aged 5 who turns 5 this month, then you could be eligible for a school age payment. We're making it easier than ever to apply, but we still ask people to check and make sure they know what they are entitled to. Now, Linda, you've obviously worked with the community in East Kilbride, which is the community that you represented whilst you were an MSP. What kind of impact could this payment have on communities and families?
Huge impact. Oh my, in times being so hard, I was really pleased when this was introduced, because it can help. It can help. But I'll tell you, one thing I think is really good about the stuff that the Scottish Government's doing is they are desperately marketing. They're looking for take up. They're trying everything they can to get good take up, unlike some of the DWP stuff where they actually rely on a certain amount of people not taking it up and include that in their projections and stuff. So yes, this is good, and I hope that schools, for example, are letting parents know, and that everyone possible are letting families know that they may well be eligible.
Fabulous. So a new Inverness Airport railway station is to open. The Transport Minister Jenny Gilruth was joined by local school children today to mark the opening of the new Inverness Airport railway station, which will see passenger service start on Friday, the 3rd of February. The new station is part of a wider £42 million Scottish Government investment in Scotland's railway, which has seen the addition of a new 950-metre passing loop, which will allow trains on the single line to pass in the opposite direction. Renewal of a 7-kilometre track and installation of an innovative signalling system. This will add capacity to the route, build resilience, and enable future freight growth, encouraging the removal of HGVs from the road. It provides another route to the airport in addition to the existing regular bus services, and following work by Hitrans includes an upgraded active travel path linking with the airport terminal. The station will improve transport links to the new town of Tornagrain and to the growing Inverness Airport Business Park, acting as a catalyst for further investment and sustainable economic development in the region. Jenny Gilruth, Minister for Transport, said, "I am delighted that Inverness Airport Station is now complete and that services will start calling at the station for the first time this Friday, tomorrow." The site was one of my earliest visits as Transport Minister, and it gives me a first-hand opportunity to see the significant progress that has been made in such a short space of time. Now, today, Puxwatawny Phil has predicted more winter. So we'll just get a quick comment from Linda about the Inverness Airport Railway. So what kind of impact on the community, on the environment, will this new railway have?
I was sort of hoping there, Saoirse, that you'd miss me out because I wasn't heard of this.
My apologies.
I'm really pleased to hear it. It's excellent stuff. I'm always pleased to hear about trains, expansion of the network. That's great. But the thing that really struck me, what you said, was freight growth and getting HGVs off the road. I think that's hugely important. So environmentally, I think that's marvellous. And I hope I hope that it's making a difference too on that road between Inverness and Aberdeen. I don't know if it is or not. I hope it is, or if that's planned for the future, because I know that's a terrible, terrible road for traffic and particularly HGVs and stuff. So good news, and I'm pleased to hear it. Well done, Jenny Goruth.
Absolutely. You'll have to take a visit up north and get the train to the airport just to
Yeah.
see. It's Groundhog Day today. So Puxwatawny Phil, the famous groundhog named for the western Pennsylvania town where he lives in a tree stump, has predicted 6 more weeks of winter today during the annual Groundhog Day celebration. Now, the annual Groundhog Day celebration gained worldwide fame following the success of the 1993 comedy film starring Bill Murray. Puxwatawny, which lies about 65 miles northeast of Pittsburgh, attracts thousands of visitors annually for its Groundhog Day celebrations. According to folklore, if Puxwatawny Phil, an honorary title bestowed on successive groundhogs, sees his shadow on the 2nd of February, there will be 6 more weeks of winter. And if he doesn't, spring will come early. People have gathered at Gobbler's Knob as members of Phil's inner circle summoned the rodent from his stump at dawn to learn if he sees his shadow. The inner circle said he did. The Inner Circle is a group of local dignitaries responsible for planning the annual event, as well as feeding and caring for Phil. This year, Phil's prediction came as ice, sleet, and snow lingered across much of the southern US. According to records dating back to 1887, Phil has predicted winter more than 100 times. 10 years were lost because no records were kept, organizers say. So, 6 more weeks of winter. Linda, are you excited for 6 more weeks of winter, or would you rather he's not seen his shadow?
I'm sitting here absolutely stunned. I'm thinking, what on earth is she talking about? I felt as if I was in a parallel universe. And I didn't even see the film because I'm not a fan of Bill Murray. So there you go. I'm completely lost. So if this wee groundhog rodent thing, whatever it may be, comes out and sees his shadow, we're going to have 6 weeks of winter. So be it.
It's a Dutch American tradition in Pennsylvania. So
is it?
you learn something new every day.
You learn something new every day. Well, that's what I said earlier, that I've got no real wish to go to America. Well, I've got no real wish to go to that particular place, all these miles north of Pennsylvania, in case I come across this groundhog. So, if they get winter, does that mean it comes across the Atlantic to us cold again? Oh, I hope not. I hope not. Though having said that, whatever suits the farmers and agriculture, that's what I want.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Spring is going to spring soon. So that's it for the evening. Thank you so much for joining me, Linda. Thank you for joining me, and
Pleasure.
Thank you for all your comments. Before I go, I just want to remind you that Broadcasting Scotland is dependent on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make regular monthly payments, thank you so much. Our programs will forever be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff and to make more programs. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great night.